guys, how's it going? Today we're going to be planting a bunch of peppers and tomatoes, as well as a couple basil plants and cucumbers. And we've got a load of them, you guys. I did not intend on planting this many, but here we are. I got totally carried away when I was down at the garden center, and now I think we've got 30 some tomato plants and 20 some pepper plants. Why not? Whether or not you're starting your tomatoes from seed or picking them up already grown on like I've done this year down at your garden center, you might notice one of 3 different types of tomato listed on the tag. So this is not the variety, it's the type of tomato it is. So there are indeterminate, determinate, and semi-determinate. Indeterminate tomatoes are one of the most common you'll find, and it's important to know if that's what you have because it's a vine type tomato. It will keep growing and growing and growing as long as you stake it or support it. So you want to make sure you have a really sturdy tomato cage that you're growing yours on, and I will show you what I'm using once we get out and get ready to plant them. The nice thing though about indeterminates is that they will start blooming and set fruit pretty much the entire season, all the way until a frost takes them. Now determinate tomatoes, there's some real pros and cons here. The pros for determinates is that they stay a lot smaller, so they grow to a determined size. They also set one big crop of flowers and fruit, and then they're done for the season. So it's really nice to have determinate. Like I've got some Romas, which are determinate tomatoes, and if you want to do any canning, they're a really good one for canning, a real popular one. You know you'll get one huge harvest all at one, relatively within the same time period. Maybe not all at once, but you know what I mean. So if you're gardening in a smaller area or gardening in containers, determinate tomatoes are definitely a nice way to go. A lot of them still require support, and I've got big supports for my indeterminates, and I usually use smaller supports for my determinate tomatoes. Now there's also semi-determinate tomatoes, which you kind of get the best of both worlds. You'll find varieties that stay smaller, but then will produce through the whole season. And I do have a couple of those here as well. So the indeterminate tomatoes we are going to be growing this year, I got a couple of pineapples, which are an heirloom. They are wonderful. They're one of my favorite heirlooms. And they are kind of like a yellowy orange. They're kind of an odd color, but oh, they're delicious. We've got an Ace 55, super common variety. 4th of July tomato will probably get the earliest tomato off those. We've got Sun Sugar, which is the only cherry I think I'm growing this year. They're really tasty. We've got Super Fantastics, which is one of the better slicing tomatoes I have ever grown. I've got 2 4-packs of those. And then we've got Beefmaster, which is a nice big tasty heirloom. For our determinate section, we have 2 4-packs of Romas right here. And then semi-determinate, we've got Celebrity, which is a very popular variety, so stays a bit more compact, but will produce all season. And then this tag doesn't label what it is. It's a Bellini cocktail tomato. I'm guessing it's semi-determinate. It only grows 3 to 4 feet tall, but it says on the website that they will produce throughout the summertime. So we'll see on that one. I wish it listed what it was. No matter what variety I have here though, I do plan on supporting all of these. A few other words you might see on tags are heirloom, open pollinated, and hybrid. So your hybrid tomatoes are a type of tomato where they've taken 2 different varieties of plants, like 2 parents, and in a controlled environment, they try to blend those 2 parents into another variety, kind of taking the best traits from those 2 parents and creating this new one. You cannot gather seeds from a hybrid and grow them the next year and expect to get the same variety. You might get one of the parents, you might get some weird variation. So those you don't gather seeds from. Open pollinated varieties are the types that you can gather seed from. Now, if you've got tomatoes all planted, like tons of open pollinated varieties planted right next to each other, you'll get crosses of tomatoes. So if you're wanting to gather seeds and get the same exact variety from year to year to year, you want to probably just plant that variety or kind of isolate it somehow. And then you have heirloom types of tomatoes, which heirlooms are just varieties that have been passed on from generation to generation to generation. They've just been around forever. They are open pollinated. Not all open pollinated varieties are heirlooms, but all heirlooms are open pollinated. So there you go. There's your quick guide on tomato terminology right there. For peppers, we have Barracuda, which is a poblano type pepper, low heat level, perfect for relleno, stuffing, salsa, and drying. We have Fire Away Hot and Heavy. I grow these, well, for the last, 4 years or so. They're really good for stringing. These work really great for drying and stringing. They have a decently high heat level. We've got Big Berthas. We've got 2 4-packs of those. Those are just a really nice big bell. We've got California Wonder, kind of a classic green bell pepper. This is a new one for me. This is a sweet pepper, Pepper Pot Sugar Kick. In fact, I think it's a new one out, a new variety that's just out this year or maybe next year. I can't remember, but anyway, I'm excited to grow that. And then we've got Gypsy, which is a low heat level, I think. Yeah. Sweet bears heavy yields of sweet wedge-shaped peppers early in the season. We've got Serrano, and we've got more. Where are my jalapenos? Did I not buy any? I'm gonna need to save some space for those, but we've got the Golden California Wonders, so we got lots of bell peppers here. And then we've got a few Amazel Basil, which this is a really great variety. The plants get massive, they're so productive, and the flavor doesn't change, even if they start to bloom. A lot of other varieties, like the flavor just gets a little bit off once the plant starts to bloom, maybe a little bit bitter, but these, it doesn't happen with this one. And then we've got 2 bush cucumbers, which I broke one of them off promptly when I got home. So, anyway, these are so productive. Space-saving vines grow up to 24 inches and 6-inch cucumbers. I planted one of these in our cut flower garden, was it last year or the year before? And I got loads and loads and loads and loads, just buckets full of cucumbers off that plant. Hopefully we have the same luck this year. All right, so let's go get these planted. I want to head to the raised bed vegetable garden first. I saved 4 spots for tomatoes in there, plus the Amazel Basil, possibly the cucumbers. Tuck these in so we don't lose them out the back of the gator. We've got quite a bit going in this garden already. We're going to be focusing on the L-shaped beds in the center because all these outer ones are already filled. We've got spinach and peas, onions and garlic. And then on the other side, we've got carrots and broccoli, peas and onions. And then we do have cabbage growing here, but I'm going to be planting tomatoes in each one of these tomato frames. These aren't actually tomato frames. These are beautiful supports. They're from Gardener's Supply. I cannot remember the name. Maybe we can pop what they are up on the screen, but they're strong enough to handle indeterminate tomatoes, which makes me very happy. And then I thought we'd utilize some of this space in some of the beds for the basil and cucumbers. Cabbage looks so pretty. I want to do one of the pineapples up here, one of the Romas, the Sun Sugar Cherry, and the Super Fantastic. Just one of those. I am going to be adding some tomato tone fertilizer in around the roots of these plants, and then we'll be top dressing around them with Land and Sea. Now, one of the biggest problems that we deal with in our area with tomatoes is blossom end rot, and you might be familiar with this already, but it's where the tomato looks great on the top, but you turn it upside down and it's got like a sunken black spot, or it could be like gray and squishy. It's pretty gross, but it's basically caused by a lack of calcium. There might be calcium in your soil, but if you've high pH like ours, that can bind up nutrients and just keep them locked up to where your plant can't take that calcium up. So you really want to provide them with the best start possible. I mean, this isn't a cure-all. There is some blossom end rot sprays you can use, some calcium that's like a quick uptake for your plant to where you can avoid that problem. The other fairly common issue is tomato splitting, which is just deep cracks that form on the top of your tomatoes, which is usually caused by watering issues, like inconsistency in watering. So like if you deluge your tomatoes with water and then let them dry out a little too much and then deluge them again, it's like too much of water for the tomato to handle and they just kind of split. So you just want to make sure that whatever water you're giving them, it's very consistent, and that's why we like to set up a drip system. In fact, right now Paul is out on the new property. This is where we're going to plant the rest of the tomatoes, and he's running a water line off of the onions that we have there, the onions and potatoes, and I'll explain all that later, but we've got everything set up to water daily, especially when it's really hot outside. We just keep those roots cool, and we kind of avoid a lot of those issues. All right, let's get these planted. All right, guys, I forgot to mention, this is important. When you're planting your tomatoes, remove lower leaves so that they are not touching the soil. A lot of issues can happen if those leaves touch the soil and get wet. And then after you take them out of the container, you can, fuss with their roots a little bit. But when you go to plant them, you can plant them fairly deep. You can plant them up along their stem because they will form roots all along that. Creates just a stronger plant. I'm going to take off this leaf too. And we're going to sink it way down in there. So the soil will come up to about here. Some people will plant them slanted, but that's good right there. Don't forget your ID tag and your mulch. This is Land and Sea. Okay, so we've got the 2 cucumbers right here with the pineapple, tomato, and cabbage. We've got the sun sugar cherry. I went ahead and planted some peppers up here, both bells. So these are the Big Bertha bells. And then I planted the sugar kick and the gypsy along with the serrano and the fire away hot and heavy. And you guys, I've never had my sweet peppers turn hot planting them close together. I get that comment every single time I plant peppers, and I have never seen that happen. And maybe it's an old wives' tale, or maybe it's meaning like if you have those peppers planted close together and you want to gather the seeds, it could possibly be hot the next year when you think that you're planting a bell pepper. They could have cross-pollinated, but I've never had them alter the flavor like in the same season that you're growing them, if that makes sense. But I really wanted to have a sampling of everything that we're gonna have out in the big garden up here close to the kitchen so that I can just run out here and grab what I need for dinner, and then the stuff out there, I'll be harvesting a lot of that just to give it away. I just enjoy growing it so much. This one is the Roma. That one is a super fantastic. I'm gonna have to make tags for those because, you know, they came out of 4-packs. And then our Amazel basil right there. So other than our ranunculus right here, every spot is planted and growing. I'm gonna be removing those to plant beans here like in the next week. Oh, you know what? I almost forgot. I used Land and Sea to top dress around all the tomatoes, and then I used it around the cucumbers. The other beds I have not top dressed yet, which I will, like over the drip system, but we were having some issues with the ends of the beds where I planted, in particular with water last year. So I kind of want to monitor that situation first, and then I'll top dress. So that if I need to make any alterations to the drip system, I can do that. It's easier when it's more visible. Now let's head out. We've got just a few left to plant here. All the rest of the plants are going to be planted down this way. I just kind of wanted to show you the area. Aaron came out here with the tractor we showed you when he tilled up 250-foot rows. This row is basically for sunflowers, vine crops. This one right here, we have a bunch of onions, so candy onions. They look really good. Planted these out just not that long ago. We've got Walla Wallas in this section, yellow sweet Spanish and Newburgh. Then we've got 2 different types of shallots. And then we've got potatoes that start here and go about to almost to where the tomato frames are. Let's go down this way. And potatoes are starting to pop through. Last variety down here are russets. So right after those, which those end about right here, so we've got this much drip tape left. I'm gonna plant all of our peppers right in here. And then we're gonna start in with our tomatoes. And this is the line I was talking about that Paul came and ran. He's going to trench this and bury it so that it doesn't, you know, sit out here and bake. But what it'll do is it's going to come down here, and then I'm going to put in a T-coupler and run another solid black poly just straight across, and then we'll pop in emitters for each individual tomato. So I'm planning in this 5-foot wide space to do 2 tomatoes, you know, just 2, 4, 6, 8, however far we need to go down. And then whatever space is left over, we're going to have corn and more vine crops. That's the plan anyway. I was just going to run drip tape all the way down, but I think it's going to be way more water efficient to water right at the root zone of these tomatoes, and that's what we've done for the past couple of years. It works out really well. Keeping water off the leaves is also pretty important. And these right here are the frames we're going to be using, so I'll start with all the tall ones first and plant all our indeterminates in these. I can't remember how many we have. I might have to be planting some indeterminates in the smaller ones, but we'll see. I'm going to frame up every single one, like I said. Now we have planted tomatoes out kind of in the middle of nowhere for the past couple of years. They get huge, and these Titan tomato frames seem to hold all the weight, even with all the wind. What we do is we drill holes in the ground and then sink the frame. You can see how far this one went in last. We sink the frame in there, and even though like right now they seem super wobbly and they're plastic, they stay up. I mean, I was super surprised. They also snap together. So like these rings snap off, and then you can store everything flat. And that's why I only have 4 put together. Paul did that real quick this morning. We're gonna just plant the tomatoes and frame them up when we have time to put the rest of the frames together. Good thing these tomato plants are small for now. So that's just the plan to get all these things in the ground. I did bring out some green stakes. These are 3-footers that I will put in next to the pepper plants. I won't have to stake them up today. Clearly the peppers are too small, but it's always nice to have your stake there so when the peppers get big and they're heavy, full of fruit, we can stake them up because they are pretty brittle. If they get a lot of weight on them and then we get a wind, they can crack in half and all that business. So I like to put the stakes in early, that way we don't damage roots later on. And then the last thing is tomato pruning. Now, there are a lot of different methods of pruning tomatoes. Determinate tomatoes you do not prune. I would not prune those. I probably wouldn't even prune semi-determinate. It's really just when it comes to indeterminate tomatoes, because like I said, they'll keep growing until you like top them or, you know, keep on pruning them. They'll turn into these huge big monster plants. My method this year is just to kind of let them do their thing though. And some people do. Some people don't even stake them or cage them. They just plant them and let them sprawl all over the ground. If you have a ton of space and you don't mind that, then go for it. I know people have a lot of luck doing that. The best luck I ever had, because you know usually I'm planting them where they have no protection, is just to go in and just sporadically prune if they get a little bit too monstrous. Because I find that the leaf canopy that they do produce, as long as they're getting enough fertilizer and water to, you know, sustain it, it does help protect the fruit from sun scald and things like that. There have been years where I go in and think I need to prune this tomato down big time, and I do it and it just kind of wrecks the tomato. I have to put harvest cloth around it to protect it from the sun for a few days so it can get used to it. So I'm just going to go in every once in a while, prune some suckers out. Let me show you what that looks like. Okay, we can probably find one here. Yeah, right here. Okay, so you've got like a main stem here, right there, and then you've got a leaf. Suckers are the little things that come out in between those. So on indeterminate tomatoes, you would come in and you can just pinch those off. And sometimes when they get bigger, you might need to use pruners, but that will help keep the growth in check. If you let those grow, they will turn into fruit producing branches, but you have to kind of take into account the overall size you want your plant to get. The more of these that you let go, the smaller the tomatoes probably will be overall, because the plant's going to be sending energy into so many different fruit instead of focusing on fewer fruit and making them larger. So it's just something to consider. We have earlier videos on tomato pruning. Maybe we can link those down below, and there's a lot of good ones out there. A lot of different methods too. Florida weave. There's, you know, people who grow them up strings, things like that. So anyway, it's fun just to try out different methods. Mine's gonna be a little bit more haphazard this year. All right guys, so I'm just gonna go in, get these tomatoes planted, and just hope for the best. I got them all planted, but I wanted to take a quick break to show you how I decided to run water to each one of them. First of all, Paul got our water line buried, and it comes right over here to our first tomato. It pops up out of the ground. It's just held down with some landscape staples, and it's not buried deep. And I decided, instead of teeing off of this 1/2 inch with another 1/2 inch and just running, you know, tons of rows of that, it would use cheaper supplies actually if I just did it this way, because I'm going to use the emitters either way. So I used 2 2-gallon-per-hour emitters on each one of these on either side and created a little well with soil. We're not running the water long enough to put smaller emitters on there. And then I tapped in with a 1/4 inch coupler and ran a 1/4 inch line, which you can see goes underneath the soil, goes over to this tomato plant, and then I put a T-coupler in there. 1/4 inch T-coupler, went off from that with my 2 2-gallon-per-hour emitters. So we should be good. I think that's gonna work out great. This water line turns on at the same time that everything else is gonna be watered out here. So I could put in an inline valve if we need to later on, or I can just adjust the emitters. We can add an extra emitter if we are finding that the water's not running long enough to fully saturate the tomatoes while it's, you know, everything else is happy. Or we can take one off or put smaller emitters on depending on how it's going. But, you know, they're so exposed, they get sun from morning until night out here. There's no break in the sun out here that they're probably going to need it. But I think it's a fairly efficient way. I mean, if we ran drip tape this whole distance, we would be wasting so much water in here. So just directing that water right toward the roots and just only using it right where we have the plants is the best way to go, I think, which got me thinking I'm going to have to do corn and sunflowers in this row because we'll plant corn as row crops, and we'll do vine crops in this one because we can tack into this same line to run individual emitters to our vine crops. Also, I did get the tomato frames in. I only had my 4-inch auger out here. I usually use the 2-inch one, which makes it a little bit easier, but you know, same difference. They're in the ground and they're in there, what, about 18 inches or so. So they still, see how they still kind of wiggle, but they hold up, or they have for us thus far. So really happy with that. I'm going to save spots, all the indeterminates. I can't remember where the Romas start here, but anyway, wherever the Romas start, that's where I'll put these two that I've got going, because those don't get quite as big, and then we'll fill in the rest of them later. But I've just got to do this same water setup like 13 or 14 more times. I did run and grab a watering can though. I'm gonna water all of these in because it is so hot, just in case this takes me a while. Shouldn't, but you know, I can't stand to see a wilting plant. So I figured out that we're gonna need to put together, if we have them, 14 of the tall ones to accommodate the rest of the indeterminates, and then 10 more of the small ones to accommodate the rest of the determinate and semi-determinate varieties on the end there. But we planted a total of 32 tomato plants today, 27 peppers, 2 cucumbers, and 4 basils. That's a good day. And I think that this irrigation system is gonna work out really well. So you can see it just pops up at each tomato, and then there's the 2 emitters, and then the little 1/4-inch spiders over to water all of them on this side. So we should be good. And I'm thinking right here where the tomatoes end, we'll just take this black poly, which goes all the way to the end of the row. We're gonna swoop it into the center and tack it down, running straight down the center, and we'll plant our vine crops. And wherever we plant one, we'll pop more emitters in. I think that'll work out just perfectly. And I'm guessing it probably looks to some of you guys like I'm gardening right on the moon. It's like total moon dust out here. We're so high pH that our soil is fairly white when it's dry, but there's quite a bit of moisture just under the soil surface. It's very deceiving out here. We've had so much moisture this spring, which has been a total gift. But this is what the cut flower garden looked like. When we started gardening this whole pasture that we bought, you know, in front of our house, the first year the cut flower garden was plunked right out in the middle of the pasture, and we just tilled it up and started gardening, and that space produced so much good things, so many good things. And we're going into our 3rd season with the cut flower garden where it's sitting right now, and you should see the soil where we're planting. I'm so encouraged by it because it's so fluffy. There are earthworms everywhere in it. And you know, we do amend a lot with compost. I'm going to be amending with the land and sea on the tomatoes. You might notice I haven't done it yet, but that's because I want to run the irrigation again a couple of times before I cover over those emitters, just in case there's any that blow off or there's any leaking, or you know, it's inevitable when I put in this many couplers, I probably didn't get one tight enough. So it's always best to leave it kind of open until you figure that stuff out and then cover over it, and that is my plan. I do have land and sea out here with me, but I just decided, you know what, we're gonna hold off, we'll test this system out, and then we will cover it over. So really all I need to do at this point is make sure that they stay watered consistently, that I get all the frames out here before they start putting on too much growth. And I may come along with more tomato tone later in the season. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I find that as long as you amend the soil in the beginning, you get that fertilizer in there, that compost, they usually grow fairly well. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful. I did try to remember as much information as I could to share. There's always things that I forget, but I hope that at least gets you started, and I hope you guys are having a great start to your growing season as well. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.